Welcome to Faith Works Live. Here's your host, Rebecca Haynie.
Hello and welcome to Faith Works Live. I'm just so glad you're here because without you, I'd be talking in a padded room, which is never fun. But that's sort of the name of the game around here. You are listening to Faith Works Live. That's what we believe around here. But what does that even look like in this crazy 21st century slouch towards Gomorrah? That is what we explore here every day. And by your good graces, it's just so great to hear from you, to hear what you think. I've been hearing from a lot of people recently who just found the show. So welcome. And wherever you're coming from, let's sit back and relax and focus on the big things, the big questions, and how to live that out in our daily lives. What does it mean to live by our faith, live by our values? It is not simple, but it is getting a little easier, I guess I could say. And in this day and age, it's really difficult to predict. I always say I could not have predicted the fights that we would have about things like biology 101 and what does it mean to be a man or a woman? When does life begin? All of those questions that I thought, okay, maybe we've come to a consensus around that on society. Nope. We need remedial courses. And it's important to stand up for women's rights. I think women's voices in particular are the ones that are in danger of being silenced. And women, when we do speak out, we have powerful voices. And we're seeing I think the fear of an engaged population of women, because when we stand up, we get results. That's what I believe. And so this one in particular, will be focused on what we as women can do to make sure we're standing for our rights in society. And we can't allow the progress that we have made to be taken away by let's just say the push from the rainbow mob to say, well, we don't even know what a woman is anymore, and we can alter the definition and thereby completely and utterly change and in many cases destroy the rights of women entirely. That is not progress. I'm the first to stand up and say, no, we're not going to bow to the insanity. But there are real policies in play here, policies that we can have a voice in protecting it, that allow us to protect those rights. And because that's the biggest question, right, is it feels like there's a giant push to either erase women, erase the definition of women, or so muddy the waters that it no longer means anything. So what do we do about all that? Well, here to solve that problem in an hour or less is our special guest, Adriana McLamb. She's with the Independent Women's Forum, and she joins us now. It is wonderful to have you. Thanks for coming on the show, Adriana.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
Well, it's great to have you with us. I've been following your work at IWF and the great team there for some time now. Would you mind giving us just a little bit about what you do and what IWF stands for?
Yeah, so I am a spokeswoman at Independent Women's Forum, and in my current role, I also work on their marketing team. But in my current role as a spokeswoman, is I'm out on the ground right now with colleagues like Riley Gaines and Peyton McNabb, fighting for Title IX, fighting for women's rights, ensuring that we're defining what is a woman, and that there are two sexes and only two sexes, and ensuring that we're protecting women as a whole. At Independent Women's Forum, we've been at the front of this fight for years now. Actually, our female athlete stories drive, as well as our petition, has been live since 2020. So it's something that we've been really driving, honing in on Title IX and protecting all those rights that our predecessors fought so hard for 50 years ago. And truly being, I think it's recently on Fox News is that Riley Gaines is the new definition of a feminist, of really fighting for women's rights and what it really means to be a woman. So at IWF, we are here supporting that mission, really focusing on protecting womanhood as a whole.
Mm-hmm. And I know this is important to you, clearly, because you're dedicating day and night on this fight, which, again, I would never have believed we'd have to, go out on and fight on this hill yet again. But if the battle has found us, so it's time to armor up. But this is something that you care deeply about as well, in particular as it affects women in athletics, right?
Yeah, so I played Division I volleyball down at Florida International University. I currently am a coach and a recruiting coordinator for travel volleyball players who are looking to play at the next level. And my goal is always to ensure that I am providing the most opportunities for those female athletes. And at this point, I want to make sure that they're not being erased in female athletics, as we're seeing more and more championships, podium spots, and even opportunities even to play and be on rosters be taken from biological women from biological man. A
Mhm.
male. So yeah, it's hit close to home, and it's something that you said it, I'm working day and night to advocate for.
Yeah, well, you use the word erase, and I think that's a powerful image, and it's often one that's lobbed against us, like you want to erase trans people or something akin to that. And I mean, the truth is that we have a separation in sports for a reason, for a biological reason that wasn't particularly controversial until the last 5 minutes. But we recognize that women and men have different strengths, have different goals, have different, markers that they can hit, and the expectations and the, the standards, the lengths of fields or lengths of swimming pools and laps and things like that change based on nothing more than biology and genetics. And that's not an attempt to discriminate against anybody. It's just recognizing that there's a blatant reality here. And the more that the political loosening of all of these things, the redefinition is a denial of that reality. And it has had a lot of consequences that have negatively impacted women. And I wonder if you'd be willing to talk a little bit more about that. You mentioned Riley Gaines, who is, famous for all the right reasons for standing up for this and for calling out the nonsense and saying it's not right for women to lose it, who have trained, their whole lives to be excellent at what they do, to have their space be taken by a man who may be like a foot taller than they are, or have, biological advantages that they can never compete away. That's just not fair.
Yeah, so to your first point about the differences in sports, and you hit the nail on the head. Is there are differences for a reason. My sport is volleyball. The net is almost 8 inches difference. My height is, I'm 5'3". If you ever see me in person, I am short. My position, there's a special position for it, but in volleyball, in men's volleyball, that average height is 6', 6'1". The speed of the ball is faster. For men's average speed of the ball is actually the world record for the women's speed of the ball. And it's a whole different game. And I mean, we talk about fields and the softball versus baseball, even the basketball, women's basketball is smaller than a men's basketball. There's all these differences, and then they're there for a reason. But when we come to opportunities, I think it's Riley Gaines is the epitome of what could happen is you lose a trophy. She literally was not handed her trophy that she earned because she tied with Leah Thomas. And because Leah Thomas, for photo ops, needed the trophy. But I think the point she's actually been bringing up recently, I think is really important, is there's only a certain amount of people who get All-American status, and that's based on your placement. Why aren't we talking about that one individual who didn't become an All-American because Leah Thomas was in that top, I think it's 12 or 18, I don't know the exact number, but there's every time that we are elevating someone that is a biological man over a female, we forget that it trickles down. It trickles down to they might not be an All-American. Then there's someone who didn't make the roster. Then there's someone who didn't get the scholarship. It trickles down to affect those at different levels. And we can't just talk about, oh, well, we'll ban it here. We won't ban it. No, it needs to be that we're being fair across the board, because if we're not getting equal opportunities for female athletes at all levels, then it's going to affect it from either the top down or the bottom, top down or bottom up, either way. And then when one female athlete is affected, it's affecting all of us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And to try to erase those clear distinctions, definable, scientifically based distinctions for the interests of politics or a preferred narrative, I think is just something that, really grinds my gears, so to speak, because it's harming women and girls. It's lessening their opportunities, and it's doing so under the guise of this new form of equality. And it's, again, I love Thomas Sowell, and a main quote from him that comes to mind is, if there's anything worse than unfairness, it's make-believe fairness. And that's the type of thing that I think we're seeing going on here. And in the name of it, it's not even equality anymore. It's a victim hierarchy, in my honest opinion. But we're trying to call this fair. We're trying to say, if you don't fight on a certain side, if you aren't interested in opening up women's sports to men, for example, like you're against what's true equality. I'm like, no, I think you don't understand that if those words really mean what you think that they mean. And you go, I mean, there's so much that to me just seems like common sense, yet here we are again, needing to reassert what a woman is, and that women deserve to have their own sports, their own spaces, their own privacy, their own locker rooms and their own dressing rooms, because that's another element of this. And I'm not sure how much that's quantified in your legislative pushes as well, but the fact that all of these athletes work in close quarters, they're dressing and undressing in front of each other, that's another element where, sex separate sports makes the most sense. If you're in a team environment, especially, that's a very vulnerable position to be in. And then to say, oh yeah, by the way, you have to share this dressing room, this, changing room with someone who is very clearly not like you in some very key ways.
Yeah. And I will say, if you've spoken to any athlete who has used a locker room with their team, that locker room is a vulnerable place. It is a place where you feel comfortable, you're decompressing as an athlete. I remember the amount of times I've cried in our locker room after a match or anything. Like, you want to feel like you're safe in that spot. And I hate to use the word safe spaces because of previous years and talking about like, oh, I'm going to get triggered in safe spaces, but this is the right time to use it, is that the locker room and those private spaces that were carved out for women specifically are no longer just for women. And that that is included in our legislative efforts, and our Women's Bill of Rights is carving out what a woman is and how we protect their spaces, whether that is athletics, whether that is locker rooms, whether that's scholarships. I think, I mean, not to divert off this women's sports stuff, but it's also infecting, like, Women of the Year is going to biological men. And it's like, there's a reason why it's called Women of the Year. You have this category. And it's like, at what point are we going to start giving out Best Female Artist and at music awards or at like actors, actresses to biological men? At what point are we erasing the category of what it means to be a woman, what it means to be separate from the male sex?
Yeah. And again, women are the ones who suffer on that, right? Because
Exactly.
apparently no one's better at being a woman than a man. That's where we are right now.
That's low. Yeah. No, it's like, we can't even we as women, we're not even the best version of women. And it's almost like, because being a woman has become also a mockery. It's like, oh, we're the stereotypical things. Like, I bring up Dylan Mulvaney. It's like, I thought at first it was almost spoof, because you're like, hey, these are stereotypical things that, honestly, if I was to make fun of a woman, I would be like, here's your stereotypical. But women are so much more than that. We're more than the clothes we wear. We're more than what we buy, the color pink and all that. I mean, there's so many things that are great about being a woman, and that we have fought so hard to protect as our own individuality, that are currently under attack and being erased just as a gender, as our sex, and all in the name of gender fluidity and identity.
Yeah. That's exactly true. Adriana McLamb is our special guest today here on FaithWorks Live. You mentioned that they have some legislative efforts to help protect women, both in sports and just in general. And I'd like to get your take on that, Adriana. We'll get into some details of what we can do and how we can either speak to our legislators or what we might be able to do to actually take action on this to help protect girls and women. And let's talk about Title IX when we return to. And the Women's Bill of Rights, you just mentioned that, so I'm not going to gloss over it. We'll make sure that we get there when we return. You're listening to FaithWorks Live. In today's world, security has never been more vital. And at FaithWorks Live, we're proud to partner with VeriGuard Security. It's a professional physical security service, and they're really raising the bar in security and private investigations. Whether you need a team of professional officers to protect what you have worked hard to build, or their mobile security units for multiple properties or large locations, from business or corporate properties to your home or neighborhood. Perhaps you've got an event coming up. They secure quality security coverage for events large and small, because it's about peace of mind and protecting you, your family, your team, and your property. Settle for nothing less than the best when it comes to your security. You shouldn't have to compromise. When it comes to security, you can trust VeriGuard. Contact them today at veriguard.us. That's VARA guard.us. For security service, you can trust VeriGuard.
Welcome to the Choices Hotline. For information on growing closer to God, press 1. For interesting activities, press 2.
Ooh, tough choice.
For entertaining activities, press 1. To learn more about the creator of the universe, press 2.
Nah.
For entertainment found in the home, press 1.
Okay.
To learn why Jesus had to die on the cross,
Later.
press. For TV programming, press 1. To learn about ensuring your place in
What's on
heaven.
the tube?
For late-night TV programming, press 1. For one more opportunity to hear how much God is reaching out to you, please press 2. For information on the Psychic Channel, press 1.
Oh.
For programs on discovering the God within you, press 2. For exotic ways to fill the spiritual void in your life.
Wow.
For the wisdom of Dr. Shami and his latest prophecies.
Oh, yeah.
Where are your choices leading you? Another message from Lifeline Productions, located on the web at lifelinepro.com.
When a woman faces an unplanned pregnancy, every possible emotion goes through her head. Where can she go for help and for hope? She can go to Intervisions. Here in our metro, we have 2 healthcare clinics where she will find hope and help. From free pregnancy testing and STD testing to free ultrasounds, Intervision serves women and men with STDs who find themselves in vulnerable situations. They're completely free of charge because of generous donations from folks like you. And their medical clinics help their patients get all the information that they deserve that empowers them to make life-affirming decisions. That's what they do at Intervisions Healthcare Clinics right here in Des Moines. Learn more at intervisionshealthcare.org. That's intervisionshealthcare.org. And you can call 24 hours a day at 515-440-CARE. That's 515-440-2273. Welcome back to Faith Works Live. If you're just joining us, our special guest is Adriana McLamb from the Independent Women's Forum. And we're talking about ways that we can actually make sure that women have their space in women's sports, to have the, to be honored as women, as what we are, because we believe that there's men and there's women, and they have very different designs for a good purpose. We're designed to work well together, and we're at our best when we work well together, but you can't really confuse the two. And when we do that, especially for this kind of redefinition of gender, of what it means to be a woman, we are more than boobs in a ball gown. We are not confused about where babies come from on this show. All of those things, these are controversial opinions. Hi, my name is Rebecca, and I say controversial things. Men and women are different, and that's a wonderful thing, and that is so good and awesome. Like, that's where all the best things come from. It's good design. So we need to kind of rediscover that and the beauty of that design. But in the process, we're not going to allow women to be erased or to be pushed around or to be pushed down, especially by men claiming to be women and seeking to win those awards and the status that comes with those women's categories. That's just not right. It's just not fair. So we're talking about fairness in the context of protecting women's rights here on this show today. And Adriana, you mentioned what IWF does in the legislative sphere, just in passing. So let's park there for a little bit and talk about what are some of the efforts that you have underway that we might be able to support so that we can help protect women's sports, women's spaces, and women's rights.
Yeah, so we do our legislative work under our C4 brand called Independent Women's Voice, and I'll speak to that. So we've been promoting the Women's Bill of Rights both at the state and the federal level, which has been such a amazing thing to be able to push. We actually just recently had our win in Kansas, where we passed the Women's Bill of Rights, and so it's womensbillofrights.com if you want to add your name to that. We are actively using those petition signatures to help our efforts in the legislative sessions and when we talk to representatives and senators. But from a legislative standpoint, it's basically the Women's Bill of Rights is defining what a woman is. That's what it is. And establishing that there are 2 genders and women are a distinct category, which I think you made the comment earlier. You're like, you make controversial opinions. I didn't ever think in my lifetime that saying men and women are distinctively different would be a controversial opinion.
That's crazy.
I never thought that would be a thing. But here we are fighting for women's rights with the Women's Bill of Rights. And that's by defining a woman, it actually helps protect all those spaces through Title IX, is that Title IX protects what it means to be a woman. Joe Biden's rewrite recently was basically changing, in layman's terms, it's obviously more complicated, that was changing sex to gender and saying sex is XX does not equal XY, your chromosomes are who you are, but rather Title IX protecting by gender is the way the administration would like you to believe that that's what it should protect. But gender. They have decided gender is fluid. You can decide one day you're a girl, one day you're a man, one day you're non-binary, you don't have gender. And we don't accept that. We accept that there are two sexes, and that Title IX should be protecting on the basis of sex, which is your chromosome, it is your biology, and it is scientific fact. It's not something that can change one day to the next. So Women's Bill of Rights really ensures, because if we protect a defined sex, then all the spaces that were protected under Title IX would remain to biological females and women.
Yeah. And it makes total sense to me. Again, these are things that we have to clarify in the 21st century. I'm guessing you saw the story of probably a couple months ago now about the Canadian weightlifter who identified as female, and he's like this big burly dude with a beard and everything. He's like, I identify as female. I imagine him as a baritone. I don't really know, but I'm just saying, like, he's very, very obviously, and there was no recourse for them, because if he says he identifies as a woman that day, they obviously had to let him compete to be consistent with their new ideology and their new definition of female, and he just blew out the category. And the crazy thing about that was that the person who had set the record, I guess the last year or during the last competition, was a transgender athlete. So a transgender weightlifter took the title one year of from the women's category, and then a big bearded man took it from the transgender athlete. And it was just one of those full circle moments that here we are, just encapsulated the microcosm, as announcers like to say, of where we are in society. And I mean, I don't know what else the people who are activists on the other side might decry that and say, oh, how terrible, you're making a mockery of all of this. But I don't know how you tell them no. I don't know how you say anybody that's identifying as a woman, if it can be based only on your feelings and not on any sort of verifiable fact, how do you say he's not a woman? I think that would be a pretty important question to answer. What are the limitations on all this? If we've redefined woman to mean basically anything, it therefore means nothing at all.
Yeah, I think that the problem with the opposition's argument is that they want to believe that everything is gray. And when it comes to biological sex, it is not gray. It is chromosomes. It is who you are. It is your body structure. You can't, and you're exactly right. Like, where do we draw a line? If we're gonna go with the opposition that you can identify as something else, then where's the line of like, oh, you have to be this certain amount of days, and then this much testosterone or estrogen, you have to get into all that. Then you have, as females, I mean, we have different levels ourselves.
Right.
The thing that defines us as a woman and as a female is our biology and our chromosomes, and that's it. And the fact that like we're having this discussion, I think that story was absolutely insane. And then I have seen the opposition like, this is a mockery to like what we're trying to our cause. Okay, what are you calling what you're doing to the female cause, what to women? Because at this point, a lot of women are like we said earlier, is the best woman in the world is not even a woman, it's a man. And we can't even compete with men on how to be a woman. So when you say like last year was a transgender athlete who identified as transgender, and then this year was this man who that day identified, those are two championships that were just taken away from women in
right.
one swoop. Like, so there has not been a biological female who has won this category or won this division or won this competition in almost 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about those people who are ending up in fourth place or ending up like not qualifying for their next event. And I think it's just, there's so many steps in competitive sports. And I think about again, back to the trickle down effect is who finished fourth, who didn't qualify for a next event or didn't qualify for the Olympics now because they came in fourth or fifth, and not just the person who's at the top and like still on the podium. And I mean, not that to discredit that, but it's affecting so much more than just one person who lost. It's affecting the people who didn't get into that event because they now don't place anymore. But I mean, I think it's insane that we're calling it that. The opposition would call that a mockery. It's like, it's not, we're following your rules.
Yeah.
Now we're playing by your rules. You see how unfair it is, and they don't want to acknowledge it.
It's good for the goose. It's good for the gander. I've heard it said, but that was back when we believed in two genders, and two sexes. So I'm not sure there is any middle ground. Like, we're the only species that seems to be confused about this. I'll just put it that way. Now, we here in Iowa have recently, I think, made quite a few strides in terms of state law to protect women's sports, as in just for women and girls, and women's bathrooms, public spaces, and as well as separate legislation that banned transgender surgeries and medications for minors. So those were hotly contested, as you can imagine. But here in Iowa, we did have quite a bit of victory on that side, I think, and I'm very proud as a woman and as an Iowan. But I know that there is this federal push as well to redefine all of this and kind of skirt over and go above the heads of the state legislatures, who many of which have enacted similar rules about this. So that's a bit of a problem from a federalist standpoint. If you've got your states that say, no, here in our state, and the schools being under the jurisdiction of the state, this is how we define women and women's sports and competition, for example, just in this arena. And then if the federal law goes above that and says, well, we're going to redefine woman, like you said, to mean gender, to mean your perception or your identity even, and not necessarily your biology, that's going to be a big problem. And it's coming into conflict now. I saw that the Supreme Court and declined to weigh in earlier, I think it was last month, in a West Virginia case that's very similar that I've been watching because of our situation here in Iowa. Do you have any updates on that and what you expect to see in the future?
I don't have any updates on that. I will say the big thing is, while the West Virginia, it was, I would say, a step back for the overall movement that we're trying to fight for women's rights. I think it also focused in on where the opposition is winning, is that they're like, we want our 6-year-old to be able to play whatever. And I mean, my focus is very much, and all of our focus is protecting female spaces and not making it just about our youth sports or anything, but expanding it to protect women. And like, our goal is to protect women and female spaces in general, and making it, because at the end of when we really focus, and I think that was it. Riley actually signed on to the amicus brief for that. I mean, it was very disheartening to see that SCOTUS wouldn't even weigh in. But we go back to, you're talking about the federal versus state. This is going to, in my opinion, personal opinion, is this is going to end up getting to that point. And it's going to come down to, where does it stand? Who has the right to say it? Because if states like Iowa, Kansas are passing legislation similar to Women's Bill of Rights, or actually the Women's Bill of Rights, and the federal does as well, but then you have other states that are more blue in nature, that are doing the opposite. Who's going to have lay of the land? Where does federal versus state? And while with West Virginia was a loss in the tally in the loss column, what's the expression? It's like, we may have lost the battle, but we're going to win the war. And I think it's now time where when you lose, also as a coach, is you learn more when you lose than when you win. And it's like, now we're like, hey, this is our strategy. We need to make sure that we're focusing on protecting women, because at the end of the day, that is what this is about: protecting women and their spaces, and by doing so, by defining what a woman is.
Well, and I think when it's this basic, we have to go back to the definitions of the words, exactly as you're saying. He who wins, who gets to define the debate, basically, who gets to define the terms, will win the debate. There's the saying. Sorry, mom brain for just a second. He who defines the terms wins the debate. There we go. I'm going to take one more quick break. Adriana McLamb is our guest. She's on FaithWorks Live today, and we're so glad she is, that she's standing for women and women's rights, women's spaces, and the safety, the privacy that we deserve as women and girls. And it's time for us to stand up and fight this fight. I know a lot of folks get, especially my sisters out there, get a little leery of confrontation sometimes. But I don't think if we can't stand up for something as simple as what it means to be a woman, like you just have to understand that that's the truth. So it's perfectly loving to speak the truth. It's time. if we don't speak up, we will lose our ability to do so. And that's kind of where we are. I think if we don't speak up now, we'll have to forever hold our peace. And that's not a good situation for you or for your daughters or for your granddaughters, for the women that you care about. So guys, if you're listening this far, we need your voice as well. That matters. Speak up for the women in your life, because you know that a good woman is hard to find. And we need to make sure that we're protecting her rights and standing up for women and girls across this nation. Especially, like I said, here in our state, we've got some good momentum going, but we're taking an eye to the federal and realizing we can't stop there. So we'll talk more about what that looks like and maybe some responses to some of the objections that Adriana's heard. We'll get a little bit of apologetics going on here when we return. You're listening to FaithWorks Live.
Yeah, I'll have the chicken.
And I'll have your triple-decker hot fudge sundae. Oh, and 2 pounds of broccoli.
For lunch?
I love their hot fudge sundaes, and this one's huge.
But aren't you on a diet?
Yeah, but I ordered broccoli.
So?
Broccoli's good stuff. It makes up for the ice cream sundae.
But you're just eating more food. 2 pounds of broccoli?
Well, it's a lot of ice cream.
Do you believe that doing good deeds can make up for your past sins?
Hey, Bob, you always wanted my guitar. Well, here, it's yours.
Wow. What do I owe you?
Nothing. I blame this guy at work for something I did, and it got him fired, and he committed suicide. So to make up for it, I'm giving you my really expensive guitar.
What does that have to do with me?
Nothing. I just need to do something nice to balance out the bad with some good in my life.
But that was pretty bad.
Well, this is a pretty nice guitar.
There's only one way to deal with the penalty of sin: forgiveness. Have you asked for God's forgiveness? Another message from Lifeline Productions, located on the web at lifelinepro.com.
There's no better time than now to stand for life. And you can stand with Iowa's original pro-life organization, Pulse for Life. They're the longest standing nonprofit pro-life organization in Iowa, and they are dedicated to informing, educating, and inspiring a new generation to value the sanctity of all human life, from fertilization until natural death. They serve at the State House. They educate in classrooms, at events. They proudly serve on the coalition of pro-life leaders. They are on the front lines of the battle against this throwaway culture of death that we see all around us, and we are winning ground. Hearts and minds are changing, and the pro-life movement is continuing to grow. And you can be a part of the exciting things that are happening right here in our own backyard at pulseforlife.org, and get your finger on the pro-life pulse. Sign up for their newsletter, find ways that you can make a difference, and how you can change hearts and minds with their pro-life apologetics course, pulseforlife.org. You know how much we love Anonymous beef at the Haynie house. It is delicious. It's wonderful quality. It's naturally raised with no steroids, antibiotics, and they just do what they do so well. High quality beef at the Anonymous farm. But did you know you can actually see where your beef comes from? You can visit Anonymous Farm. The fine folks, Dave and Mary Lynn, are the most hospitable folks I may have ever met. They'll let you feed a bottle calf and then meet the cows at Anonymous Farm. And opening soon is a special treat, Mulberry Cottage, for a stay at the Anonymous Farm. It's a family-oriented getaway, and they'll let you hike the trails out there. You can forage or bird watch or just enjoy the beautiful sunset from their porch. I'm very excited to check it out myself, and they'll even let you do a cookout with Anonymous beef. Order your beef or your next vacation at anonymousbeef.com. That's OHNEMUS beef.com. So much fun today with Adriana McLamb. We're talking about serious stuff, but that doesn't mean we have to be dour about it. Oh no, we're having lots of fun, because nothing's more fun really than standing for the truth, I think, with a smile on your face. That's what it means to be a graceful culture warrior in this day and age. At least that's my goal. Whether I make it or not, jury's still out on that. You know what? I'm sure they'll let me know. Rebecca Haynie is my name, and you're listening to FaithWorks Live. Adriana's with the Independent Women's Forum, and she's been talking with us about what their group is doing and some of the efforts they have to help protect women, their Women's Bill of Rights that they have through their sister organization. Just to make sure I get that right, clarify. Feel free to clarify if I mess it up. But the Women's Bill of Rights, check that out for sure. And you can support that by adding your name to the petition, protecting women's sports and women's spaces. And Adriana, you guys also go to college campuses and do big events as well in the effort to raise awareness for these issues and to help women, empower women to stand up for ourselves as well. And you've got another one coming up, I think I saw here in a couple of weeks. Am I right about that? Fact checking me live on the air.
No, you're good. Actually, so Riley Gaines actually does. It's a little tour. We have a plethora of coalition partners who help put on these events. As we're not a college organization group, but there's some amazing college groups that do have and are hosting us through Riley Gaines at these events. So Riley is making her rounds around the country, advocating for women's rights and ensuring that her voice and all of women's voices are being heard to college students, as well as past that. Especially if you're on social media, you definitely have seen a clip or two from one of those events.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and college campuses are kind of like the belly of the beast where all the craziness is happening. It's like a petri dish. I suppose that's an accurate descriptor. Like, we're experimenting with our culture and saying, here, let's throw all of these elements in and let's just see what comes out. And I haven't been too impressed so far, but we'll just, this is where we need to do the actual education, it seems like. So what are some of the objections that you might be hearing, whether if it's on a college campus, that's great too. But what do you think are most on the minds of impressionable young men and women, I suppose, but and the people who are confused and in between now? What are you hearing in response to the efforts that we have to protect women?
Yeah, so I'll start with the college campuses definitely are the most moldable places. During college, my mom gave me a shirt afterwards that said, I no longer fit into it, but that said, I made it through college without turning into a liberal. She thought it was hysterical.
Mom.
So there are the most moldable places, and we saw what happened with San Francisco State and with Riley Gaines and how that was an atrocious attack on free speech, on Riley, on just the women's rights movement. We are the women's rights movement. Like, we are protecting women. And it was very sad to see that. But just as a whole, I think the opposition has really tried to frame, and I think we've done a great job countering, is that this is an anti-trans bill, that we are anti-trans, and that this is we just want to erase them, and that we want to pretend they don't exist and not acknowledge that. But that's not the case at all. It is we are pro-woman, not anti-trans, and that I don't just mean that as a talking point. It's like, it's actually true. And I learned this the very hard way, that there is opposition out there. But it also helped a lot is I posted my first national TV hit on my personal social. I was proud. It was my first national moment. And I got a lot of positive comments. But there's always those ones that were like negative. And they were from people I knew. They were people I knew and people who knew me in the athletic space and everything. But it helped me actually try to understand their arguments as well. And they're so focused on protecting the rights and the mental health and protecting trans people, that they're okay with erasing women. And that is what I learned from that. It was that my rhetoric was anti-trans, and I was just talking about, actually my clip was just talking about the facts about women's and men's volleyball and the height of the net, like I said earlier. And I was being anti-trans, and I was saying that men and women's sports being unsafe was dangerous, as I'm saying all trans people are unsafe. I'm like, no, I'm using the example of Peyton McNabb, who got knocked unconscious by a trans athlete hitting a ball across the net. But how we have to reframe that rhetoric is that we're not being anti-trans. Our goal is not to erase these people. These people have their space, they have everything, but they can. And most people who are moderate to right, or even just moderate, would agree is like, I don't have a problem with you live your life. I define myself as a very small government person. Go live your life, whatever. But how you choose to live your life impacts others, and this is just a general statement, that's when it becomes a problem. And right now, how trans identifying people, especially in the sports space, encroaching on women is where the problem lies. If they created their own category, you would probably see this issue disappear. Or if you accepted that we're going to compete where we identify as this, but we are going to compete with our biological sex, this wouldn't be an issue. But when you start encroaching on a class that is protected and that is had fought so hard 51 years ago to be defined as separate but equal, you're going to hit some opposition. And at the end of the day, the opposition's narrative is that we're anti-trans, but at the end of the day, they're anti-women.
By those same rules, right?
Yep.
And we see that with like J.K. Rowling, for example, who is, definitely a self-avowed feminist and, very progressive, but she's saying there's a difference between men and women. And I'm not going to budge on that point, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. And because she has that platform and being very successful, the anger towards her as a woman for saying that, and many other voices, she's just one of the most well-known. When women stand up and say, hey, actually, this is bad for women because there is a difference and this is a problem. Also, I would say a lot logically, a lot of the people in the LGBT camp are starting to say, hey, we don't really know what to do. All of this is becoming very contradictory. It's becoming very clear that we're redefining things. And now all of a sudden we don't know where we stand, or maybe some of what we wanted to happen is being reversed in ways that are damaging. So it's really causing, I think, many people on the progressive left, the woke left, to have that I want to say come to Jesus meeting.
I was going to say the exact same thing.
It's not really appropriate, I guess, in this context, but but the struggle that I think I have are with women who say, well, yeah, I agree with you in private, but we can't speak out at the risk of maybe being canceled or losing friends or any of that type of thought. And I'm kind of past that point as well. I wear all of my opinions on my sleeve, like it or not, at least you know where I stand. But I don't believe that there is going to be a better time, because if we continue again to ascend and kind of nod our way down this road to say, if you feel like a woman, then that's okay, Shania Twain, like you can be whatever you want because, man, you feel like a woman that day. And it's not true. And we're starting to see some of the fruit of going along, just continuing to parrot that. One of the most controversial thinkers of the last 100 years is Jordan Peterson, and he refused to go along, to get along, so to speak, in particular when that was going to redefine legislation about speech. Because this has impacts, as you said, on the speech issue, on people's First Amendment rights as well. If you can no longer assert simple truth and speak it out loud, or be allowed to gather people in a place to hear even open debate between two different sides of this, which is what we're seeing on college campuses, that is highly concerning. So if you care about any of those issues about speech, your ability to speak freely, your freedom to think for yourself, not to mention the gender binary, even, setting that aside, this is such a basic issue that I don't think we can afford to stay silent about it.
No, and I think we can't. And anyone who's listening, whether you've been impacted by this or not, you have a daughter, you have a mother, you have a sister, you have someone in your life who is going to be impacted by what it means to be a woman changing. And so I would encourage anyone that sees this issue and is afraid to speak up, is you have what's happening now is it's becoming an army behind you. And I get to work with Riley Gaines, which is really cool. I get to say that, but that's why I Stand With Riley started trending immediately. As a marketing person, I was really excited. But because people are like, oh wow, I actually stand with her. And there is this, but we talk about free speech, and it was when her right to free speech without retaliation, like physical retaliation, was threatened, is when everyone was like, oh wow, we have to stand up for this. Because at the end of the day, one, it shouldn't be a controversial opinion, but even if you don't agree, we're not even able to speak up at this point because people are afraid of losing friends, losing family, losing employment. I asked before speaking out publicly about this for IWF, I asked why one of the directors of the club I work for, she goes, is your employer, not realizing that I work for where, and so, like what I do for work. She's like, well, is your employer okay with you speaking out? That was her first question. She's a savvy businesswoman, actually one of the best businesswomen I've ever worked with. And I was like, no, like they're actually the ones that are promoting me to do this. And and want me to do this. But the fact that she asked that question still is ingrained in my head, that is a question everyone has to do before they send that tweet, before they make that Facebook post, or even if they're before they talk over drinks at happy hour now. Like your employment, your life, your family dynamic can be impacted if you disagree with what anyone else thinks, which has just come to the bigger, larger problem is like, if you can't agree to disagree and have a cordial discussion, what is the point of free speech? It's just free thought that you can think for yourself, which I think is a God-given thing, not a government-given thing.
Amen.
But free speech is something that is great about our country and great about a lot of nations that have adapted that, where we have the First Amendment rights. That's why it's number one. It's we have the freedom to say what we think, to have our opinions, and when we are threatened with either heckling, verbal taunting, or even physical, as we saw with Riley, physical attacks, it's scary. But at the end of the day, I want to rest assure anyone who's aligned on this issue is that we are in the right, because again, we're being pro-woman. We're not being anti-trans. We are being pro-woman and protecting what it means to be a woman at the fundamental level.
Yeah. And if we don't, who will? And if we don't stand up now, when is a better time? No better time than now. That's what I say. And it's time to have a little bit of courage. We've got that in us. We're strong. And I was thinking, just, parting shots before we go, that you might have some thoughts with your marketing expertise about the tricky situation that Anheuser-Busch and Bud Light find themselves in. And I mean, I consider that a victory, at least for mobilizing people that are willing to take a stand to say enough is enough. I mean, I don't tend to buy a Bud Light at the best of times, but I'm not doing it now because now it is making that political statement. So I wonder, just, in closing, your thoughts on where they find themselves, and is there any way that they can, maybe start backpedaling, taking a stand for the truth? I mean, I doubt that they will at this point, but I just find this a fascinating phenomenon.
As a marketing person, as a marketing director, I really want to know the approval process that got to. Like, I just want to know that. I'll say that first, is I who greenlit that, like, all through the steps, because I'm at a small organization where I'm at. There's so many steps for approvals before we even send out like a tweet sometimes. So, but besides that, and we talk about the go woke, go broke, which I think is a good rally cry. But at the end of the day, is when you isolate your base, and Bud Light and Anheuser-Busch and these beer brands, their base is leaning right. When you annihilate your base to go after a new demographic, you're doing it wrong. The goal is to expand your audience by expanding it. But when you go far right to far left, or on the spectrum, and you try to do a whole course correct, you're gonna make no one happy. And I think we're also learning that corporations' political opinions matter to people. Like, where my money is going to be what you're advocating for politically is going to also determine how I spend my money. How am I going to choose Bud Light, which I'm not a Bud Light drinker either. But I never have been, but it's still like, at what point does your political beliefs as a corporation affect your bottom line? And then you ask the question, is politics and culture wars, is that where corporations should be? In my opinion, no, stay out of it. Focus on what you're good at, making beer, which, again, subject to opinion. And with these companies, or with Disney, and I live in Orlando, so I do frequent the parks, but with Disney, focus on making magic, like focus on what you're good at, and not getting involved in culture wars, and why they might feel like they have this entitlement, as they have this following, they have this brand. From a marketing perspective, I think if we focus on your comparative advantage of selling a product that you're good at, and let people think for themselves instead of trying to get involved in lobbying efforts, society would be a better place. And while corporations are allowed to have their opinions, I don't think they should be trying to persuade people to their opinions.
Well, and if we may not agree on everything, but if you're putting your opinion out right in front and center of your marketing strategy, and then you're looking at me like, I really disagree with just about everything that you say. So, and you think I'm kind of stupid enough to keep shut up and buying your product anyway, you've got another thing coming for me. So, and Disney is another great example too, which is probably its own show, even in yeah, as we're wrapping up now, but they're also content purveyors.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting to see how when you thought you were paying for the experience of childhood innocence and magic, and now we're learning that they're turning our own maybe naivete and our own blissful ignorance against us. Now that I'm a parent and I'm watching everything that my kid watches, and even just the simple cartoons that are on, you just can't trust it anymore because they're actively teaching, they're actively showing their political opinions and their thoughts about gender and worldview, and there is a re-education that's been going on. So yeah, that's a whole nother soapbox for another
episode is
yeah.
just culture and how corporations and messaging affect our youth and our mindset. But yeah, that could be a whole nother topic.
It could. We'll have to have you back. We'll talk about that subject, like the impact that corporations have and all the messages that we're just bringing into our brains, that we're steeping in. We don't even realize it until the kid is like, "Hey, mommy, what's that?" And I'm like, "That's a show we're not going to be watching anymore. Thank you. Let's go play outside."
Yeah. And I wonder what market, again, how to get through the approval process. Like, who's not thinking about the audience development and retaining people? But that's a whole nother thing. But I'm really happy to chat about this topic about women's spaces and how they're being affected. It's insane.
One more time for the Women's Bill of Rights. So that's something to keep an eye on. And is it the womensbillofrights.org?
.com.
womensbillofrights.com, and check out the Independent Women's Forum to stay up to date. You can sign up for their newsletters and their updates as well, which I recommend that you do. And Adriana McLamb has been our excellent guest. Thank you so much, ma'am. We really appreciate your work in this fight and the fact that you get up every single day and you're standing up for women, for girls, and protecting what it means to be a woman and the specialness that entails. And we've got to do it. I don't see any other way. We are strong. Hear us roar for all the right reasons. Thank you.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Faith Works Live. Like I said, I think it's a time to make obvious statements cool again, right? Like self-evident truths are only self-evident if you are willing to speak them out loud. So that's our, I guess, parting shot for the day, is that it's time for us to armor up, to pray it up, and then to let it go. If you have a truth to speak, you need to speak it out loud, because if not now, when? And if not you, then who? At least that's our approach here on this show. If you'd like to talk to us about some opportunities to do that, we'd love to chat a little bit more about that. We get each other equipped and encouraged here on the show. You're not in it alone. Rebecca Haynie is my name, and I would love to continue the conversation further if we want to talk about more ways that we can stand up for women, for girls in our state and points beyond. Get at me. Let me know. Faith Works Live on Facebook. Follow us there. On YouTube, if we haven't been canceled yet, it's hit or miss. But if you're seeing this, well, we're still on this side. So thank you for checking us out, and reach out wherever you find your podcast. Share it with a friend. And until next time, we have a mission, so let's be about it.
Good morning, Jensen.
Oh, Mr. Sullivan, I just can't begin to thank you enough for this corner office. This is so cool.
You're welcome.
And that new admin you assigned to me, oh, she is so great. Every morning I have more paper clips and my stapler's always full.
She's one of the best we've got.
And she even makes coffee for me every morning. Oh, and check this out. Come here.
What?
Look at this. See that homeless guy on the street way down there? I've been throwing paper clips at him all morning. He has no idea where they're coming from.
You've been doing what?
Hold that thought. Mrs. Wilson, I need more paper clips.
Right away, sir.
Anyway, I'm sorry, you were saying?
I want to know how that report's coming.
Huh?
The report. We gave you this office and our best admin so you could focus on the report. What have you been doing?
Well, I've just been throwing paper clips out the window.
We are God's workmanship, created in Christ Jesus to do good works. So what are you doing with the blessings that God's given you? Another message from Lifeline Productions, the comic strip of radio, at lifelinepro.com.
Take me in your lifeboat, take me in your lifeboat. It will stand the raging storm. Take me in your lifeboat, take me in your lifeboat. It will bear the spirit home. day or you sleep in the deep. Now fathers and mothers are praying so loud. Oh Lord, won't you take us in your lifeboat? Take me in your lifeboat. Oh, take me in your lifeboat. It will stand the raging storm. Take me in your lifeboat. Oh, take me in your lifeboat. It will bear the spirit home. Clouds are so heavy, the wind is so loud. Thunder is rolling, beckoning the crowd. They pray for the shipmates for what they had done. Took the dying sailor in their life.